Welcome back to The Confidence Show with me, Rebecca Halls. Today, I've got a very special guest with me. I'm very excited to introduce you to Daire Paddy. Daire is a business coach known for combining the energetic and the strategic to help you design a business and life that feels fun and pays generously. She's the host of the Your Biz Your Rules podcast, and her and I are also combining forces to run the Self First Retreat in January 2023, which you can find out more about in the show notes. Welcome, Daire. It's so lovely to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
Oh, I feel so giggly. We've just had such a lovely chat before we started recording about the retreat, and now we've got so many ideas. I'm like buzzing with excitement. So we're going to calm down a little bit and just have a nice, calm chat without too much giggling, we think.
We'll try. But do you know what? There's nothing wrong with a good giggle.
I know. It's so nice, isn't it? I think we're so serious all the time in business, and we've always got so much going on that sometimes it's nice to just sit and laugh about nothing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Why did you decide to start your own business, and what did you start off doing?
Well, I will be honest. I decided to start my own business because I don't do well being bored. So I worked full time while I was doing my degree, like full time. And prior to that, I did my A-levels and GCSEs at the same time. And so when I graduated everything and I was just left with a full-time job, I was like, what do I do with all of this spare time? Like, I don't like it. And so I started doing some freelance stuff on the side, and it really was never supposed to be like the main gig. It was never supposed to be what it's become. And the way we got there is I had a bit of an incident, let's say, with my boss at the time. And I hit a wall. I was like, I cannot stay here. I can't. I will lose my mind. I will literally lose my mind. And so I remember phoning my boyfriend at the time in tears saying, oh my God, I hate it. This just happened. And he was like, babe, hand your notice in. And that was the amount of planning that went into it. That was a Friday afternoon. And by Monday morning, they had my letter of resignation. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to turn this into a viable business. I can't just sort of mess about doing a few bits here and there because it's fun for me. I have to actually make it work.
That's so good though. Like, I really admire the fact that you had that situation, and rather than kind of play it out or just carry on being in that situation, you were just like, no, do you know what, I'm not available for this, like I don't deserve to be treated like this, here's my resignation, see ya. And what a way to like launch yourself into full-time entrepreneurship.
Well, so here's the thing. I think I'm that kind of person who can take a lot. I can take like a lot of clobbering from a lot of people, but there comes a time when it's like a limit is reached and I just like, no, I have to just do something about it. And I think the real blessing in that situation was I didn't really have the opportunity to test things out and try things out and overthink things and, you know, try and figure out what would work. I had to do it. I had to make it work. And then, so add in an extra layer of 2 weeks after I left my day job, my boyfriend got the sack.
No.
And we were like living together at the time. And obviously like our agreement had been like he would cover things for a couple of months just while I got things up and going. And then suddenly, not only does he not have a job, but he's like there all the time. And it was a real baptism of fire. It was.
Oh my God, that's what timing.
No, I have to laugh about it, but at the time it was an ordeal.
I know. Oh my gosh, that must have been so stressful. How did you kind of deal with that? Like, what did you have any, diving straight into practices, like did you have any practices that you had to create then, like to say, do you know what, this is what I need to do to be able to make this business work? I need this time, or I need to put this practice in place, or I need to put this system in place.
And so one of the biggies, and like this isn't really a business system, but when I decided that this was going to happen, that I was going to leave my job, I was like, right, I'm getting a puppy. Because I know my own habits and my own tendencies, and if I don't have to leave the house, then I won't. Like I'll just stay at home. I will be in my comfy clothes. I'll have Netflix on. I'll be loving life, but I will not be outside of these four walls. And so I was like, no, if I'm going to work from home, I will also lose my mind if I never leave the house. So I was like, if I get a puppy, then I'll be forced to get out every day.
That's such
and so in those early days, I would say my most like solid practice was getting out every morning, taking Rosalie to the park and listening to a podcast. So that was my little routine. I'd go and I'd get some fresh air first thing. I'd get grounded by being in nature. I would be away from my desk and be very present, taking care of her because she was so little. She was so little, and there were so many other dogs at the park, and I was definitely a neurotic dog mum at the time. And I would also be listening to a podcast, and because it was like quite a walk there and back, I would choose like a really meaty one, so like 45 minutes to 60 minutes long, where I was really taking in what was being shared with me. And something that I've always prided myself on doing, and I think this came from many years of juggling so much study alongside other things, is if I consume something, I do something with that information right away, whether that is like taking notes, whether that is, these days jumping on Instagram stories and sharing things, weaving it into conversations or things that I'm teaching, or maybe just taking action on the advice. And that has just become something that I do very, very naturally. And I think that is what really helped me like develop different systems in my business and hone a lot of my personal practices too, that would, give me the sustained energy and the mental fortitude that it takes to stay in business.
That's so good. I think there really is something about starting your day in that way, where it is about you and where you can absorb that information. And I love that suggestion of actually taking action straight away on something that you've learned. And I think that's probably one of the places that I don't want to say that I go wrong, but I often will listen to all this advice. And I like for years, I've listened to advice, I've listened to podcasts, I've listened to tips, but I don't necessarily implement something straight away. Sometimes if something really grabs me, I will, but I feel like I just consume it all and then it just goes in one ear and out the other. And I'm like, oh, I learned this then, and then I forget about it years later. So I think that's a really good way to kind of keep those lessons and implement them.
I think it's one of those things, like anything else, it's a habit, it's a practice, because I by nature, I'm a binger. I will binge watch the box sets in a single night. I will like read a whole novel in one sitting. Like that is my natural way of consuming things. So I've had to really train myself to not do that when it comes to like personal, professional and spiritual development stuff, because then that does happen, that you miss so much and you don't really ground yourself and embody yourself in what you're learning. And I really think that that is so important, especially if you work in any kind of like coaching or healing capacity. You have to know your stuff, not just intellectually, but experientially. And so now one of my little personal policies that I've made for myself is if I read one chapter of a non-fiction book, I have to stop and then go and do something with it. I'm not allowed to read 2 chapters, like one is my limit, and then I have to do something.
That's so good. It's such a good practice. I've actually started doing that with one book that I downloaded on Audible. I downloaded it the other week. It was a new one. Oh, it's not a new one, but it's a new one for me. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's Positively Wealthy, something like that. But it's like there's like 30 days of practices to implement into your life. So now I'll like listen to that one chapter and then I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna do this practice now. And I've started to do that, which is nice. And it's a bit of a refresh for me. So it's a lot of things that I've already done, like the gratitude list, things like affirmations. I do all those things anyway, but it's almost like it reinforces it. And it reminds me when I've stopped doing things like that consistently, it kind of brings me back and makes me go, oh yeah, I remember how good I feel when I do those things consistently. So let me integrate that into my life again.
Well, and I think for all of us, there are so many things that we will have learned in the past or tried in the past, and we didn't stop doing them because they don't work. Like we stopped doing them because, we got distracted. We were trying something else, and, you can't do everything all at once. So it is really helpful to revisit a lot of that old stuff, because new isn't always better.
No.
Sometimes we've found the thing that works for us and we just need reminding of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the simplest things can make the biggest difference. Like affirmations for me make a massive difference when I repeat them consistently. And it's so easy. It's not going to cost you anything. You just have to sit there and say them. And like you can do it all the time, anywhere. And I remember there's been loads of different tools, as you say, like I've tried before, then got distracted by something else and forgotten about it. Or I've thought to myself, oh, that doesn't work, because I've implemented it for like 3 days and gone, oh no, I don't like that anymore. And then I just decided it doesn't work, so I don't stay consistent with it. So yeah, it's nice to come back and do those things. So you
For me,
kind
it's morning pages.
oh yes, do you know what, I tried that, and I again was really consistent with it for about a week and then just stopped. I just can't
The
cope.
thing is, it sounds so unsexy and so like it doesn't sound like one of the exciting kind of mindset practices to do. But honestly, that has been such a game changer for me. It really, really has, because I struggle with anxiety, and I also struggle with a very overactive brain a lot of the time. And if I start my day with morning pages, then immediately like that all calms, all of the voices calm, and I'm able to move forward with purpose, because I just get it all down on paper. And when it's all down on paper, it's not rattling around up here and like pulling me in opposite directions. And so for me, like that, if I could only pick one like positive practice to have in my life, I would have to go with that one.
That's so good. I never realized that you had anxiety before. I know we've obviously been on a lot of calls together. We've done a lot of had a lot of mindset conversations, but I never realized that you had anxiety as well. How does that kind of show up for you, like in life and in business?
Um, so I think one of the ways that it used to really hit me was around being seen.
Mm.
And so I would feel very, almost like I was in danger when I was being very visible, when the spotlight was on me. So anything like live streaming or even speaking up on group calls, like that just filled me with such terror that I would freeze and I would not say anything. And even like back in the day when I had a corporate job, if I was in a business meeting with more than a couple of people, the whole time I was in that meeting, it's like I would be like shaking and sweating and like terrified that someone was going to ask me a question and I was going to have to answer it in front of everybody.
I so relate to that. I used to be like that at school. Like, even I remember I had a biology teacher, and he used to terrify me because he'd always pick on people to answer the questions. And throughout the whole, I used to skip the class so many times because it gave me such like physical symptoms of anxiety. I was so terrified that I was going to be asked, and I used to go bright red and I would sweat, and yeah, it's just horrible. But we first met when I was in a mastermind, and you were a coach for like the different groups in the mastermind. And you used to speak on live on there, like you'd host Zoom calls with us. So I never would have guessed that that was something that worried you.
Well, and that's really the impact of continuing to work on the things.
Mm.
And like, especially if you know that there is something that you struggle with, if you know that there is a particular habit that you have or a tendency that you have that will detract from your bigger goals, then really it's your responsibility to stay with that. And even if it's uncomfortable and painful and absolute agony at times, stay with it and work with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so, I mean, most of the things that actually propel us forward and get us to where we want to be are uncomfortable, because they're out of our comfort zone. They're things that we're not used to, and they are the scary things that we have to do, like put ourselves on video or show up on a live or be on social media, like have our faces on social media, and they are uncomfortable. But as you say, like when you work through those, it does become easier. Like I saw the live that you did the other week, which we're going to talk about I think in the next episode that we record, but you did a live on Instagram the other day, and you came across as so confident. Nobody would ever have guessed that you were anxious, but I guess that's that, as you say, that's what comes from working on yourself consistently and choosing to take that responsibility and say, do you know what, I have anxiety, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to not let that get in my way or prevent me from being where I want to be.
And, you know, that's actually one of the biggest, I want to say, mistakes that I see people make when it comes to, you know, personal development and inner work and mindset work and all of that stuff, is that they will choose to work on the things that actually that they're already quite good at. So they'll work on the things that don't really trouble them. They'll work on the things that feel like the easier option. And I completely understand that impulse. Like, nobody wants to torture themselves. But actually, if you want to see the growth, it's like, it's the annoying bits, it's the hard bits, it's the challenging bits that really need your attention.
Yeah, and they're the bits that you can see the biggest difference. And I think as well, you don't always see the difference instantly, which is why people will choose to work on the things that aren't so hard, because typically when things aren't so buried deep or so ingrained or feel so uncomfortable, you see a shift a bit quicker. Whereas I feel like the stuff that is really a massive struggle or is really deep within you, when you start to work on that, you don't see the shift instantly. Like, it can be weeks or months or even years before you can sit there and go, oh, actually, that thing that I've always struggled with, now it feels a bit easier.
And when you always work on the thing that feels easiest, it's like you're giving your ego a big hug. You're making it feel really good about itself because it's getting all of this reinforcement that it's doing a good job, because it's, you know, it's handling the situation.
Yeah, that's such a good way to look at it. Our ego's got a lot to answer for. Just trying to look after us. So we talked about how you kind of threw yourself into running your business. How have things evolved over the last few years for you?
Well, when I very first started, I kind of sidestepped into marketing because that's what I did in my corporate job. So it just seemed like the easiest option to just do that on a freelance basis. So I started working with a lot of people behind the scenes in their businesses with their content strategy, and I like managed the content and created the content for a lot of people too. And I noticed myself naturally gravitating towards people who were either like business strategists or coaches. Like, those were just two areas that really captivated me. They inspired me. And when you have to create a whole bunch of content for people, you want to be inspired. So I had the opportunity to be behind the scenes in a lot of these different types of businesses. And the more I did, and the more I had to pretend to be them in the content that I was creating, the more I was like, I just want to be doing that. I don't want to be pretending that that's what I'm doing. I want to be doing it. And so in, goodness, what year are we in? So in, I want to say like early 2019, I started making those shifts. I started retraining in many different coaching modalities and practices, and really just allowed my business to evolve and pivot into the direction that really inspired me and really absorbed me.
That's so good. There's two things that I want to touch on based on what you just said. First of all, I feel like it's important to mention that obviously you are behind the scenes of some huge brands and some huge companies, and that's not a bad thing by any means. But I think when we all go on social media and we see these coaches or businesses where there's this perception that it's just them running their business, and we see all the success they're having and we see them hitting these crazy goals of like 6 figures or 7 figures, and it seems like they're doing it themselves, it makes us feel like we're not good enough, when the reality is there's someone behind the scenes, most likely writing the content, planning the content, posting the content, doing all the launch strategy, putting everything together, and that person is more just kind of the face of the business. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think sometimes we need that reminder to say, like, we're not doing anything wrong if we're not where that person is, because they have got a hell of a lot of support that we don't necessarily have.
And I think that is also an invitation to maybe pay closer attention to the type of people you're following, because if somebody is omnipresent and doing all of the things, I can guarantee you that they are not doing it themselves. And my question is, how honest are they about that?
Yeah.
How honest are they about the amount of help that they're getting? Because if they're not, if they allow you to believe that they do everything themselves, because, you know, it's that badge of honor, like, I do all of this myself, like, look how excellent I am, I'm a one-woman band, I've grown this from the ground up, rags to riches, la la la. If they allow you to believe that, that's not empowering. And I can bet that a lot of these people claim that their core values are, you know, empowerment and lifting others up and authenticity and integrity and all of these buzzwords that we see. But if you start to like unravel what's really going on there, and if you zoom out a little bit, you can see immediately who has a team of supporters and who doesn't. It's just, you know, like I said, an invitation to consider a little bit more wisely who you're allowing to like fill your feeds and fuel your mind.
Yeah.
Because if you're following people who always, even without intending it, make you feel slightly less than, like you're just not quite good enough, then you're never really going to be able to like step up and be everything you want to be in the world, because you're always going to have those questions and those doubts niggling away at you in the back of your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, like based on what you were saying, like we're not saying there's anything wrong with having a team. It's just when people sell you this vision of you can be as successful as them without a big team, it's very much not in integrity. And it's like selling something that isn't real, like it's selling something that's completely fake. And I think it's really important as well, especially as more people become coaches, more people get into the coaching industry, more businesses are born, especially through the pandemic and stuff. It's important that we see or we understand that you can't do it all by yourself. And if you're trying to do it all by yourself, it is going to be exhausting.
Yeah, and I remember way back when I was working with somebody who she worked with small businesses, and she was selling this marketing system. So it was like a framework in a kind of course, that sort of thing. And she was selling that as like, if you just implement this, then you will be able to, you know, have a presence in all these places and make this money that you want to make, and everything will be great. And I remember sitting there and looking at it and thinking, but you don't actually use this system, you use me.
No.
And I don't use this system.
Oh, it's so
And
frustrating, isn't it?
yeah, so like that's a big thing. Like if you are purchasing something that is geared around like, this is how you market yourself, or this is how you design a product, or this is how you structure a different element of your business, don't just take, you know, their testimonials and sales copy as gospel. Actually look at their business. Can you see evidence that they are implementing this thing? If you can't, then it might be a fun intellectual exercise, but it's not grounded and embodied in their practices and in the way that they do things. And therefore, they can't be guaranteeing to you that it's going to work.
No. And I think as well, that's important. Like nobody can guarantee that something's going to be going to work. But I feel like the way that people market themselves these days, I mean, I don't just want to sit here and have this as like a bashing session, because it's not at all. But I do see a lot of marketing where it is guaranteeing you success or guaranteeing you results. And nobody can guarantee you results at all, because it comes down to what's going to work with you for a start. Like I've been part of programs where I've followed everything to the letter, yet got to the end of it and not got any results, because that particular way of running a business or that particular business model does not fit with who I am, and it does not fit with the way that I want to run my business. So I think we get caught up in trying to find the perfect blueprint and trying to find the thing that's going to give us the results instantly, when nobody can give us that. It does come from trial and error. And yes, we can take different things from different people, but ultimately we have to kind of develop our own thing. We have to create the rules for ourselves and decide what is going to work for us, and what our definition of success looks like in that same way.
Absolutely. And so just like linking back to what we were talking about earlier, by like if you absorb something, do something with it. This is where you get to like test things out. So if you're, I mean, like we used books and podcasts as an example, but if you're taking a course or part of a program and you watch a training video, go and do something with that. And like my rule for myself is I'll do it twice. So I'll do the thing twice, and if it doesn't work after that, I'll tweak it. Because I think the first time we do something, especially in business, there's always room for error and improvement there. But if I've done something twice and it doesn't work for me, then I give myself permission to either tweak it and try again or do something different.
Yeah, I think that's such a good idea, as you say. And I mean, I feel like that's like anything that we do, like in life and business. Like it's not always going to work first time. And I think some of the best lessons that we get are when it hasn't worked the first time. Because not only that, we can then put our own spin on it and go, okay, well, I followed it to the letter. This didn't work for me this way, but actually I can take this, this, and this, and then I can go forward and try it slightly differently. And then that becomes something that we can add to our own toolkit as well, because once we've learned something, we've implemented it, we've added our own spin on it, we can then offer advice on what worked for us. Again, not saying if you follow this blueprint then you're going to get everything that you want or need or ever wanted in life.
Well, and I do think it's quite nice and affirming when you can identify what does work for you out of something. But I know at the same time, I've also been in situations in the past where I've implemented something that I've been taught. And like I am, you know, that high achieving gold star student. I will follow things to the letter. And I've implemented everything and it just has not had any results. Not just it hasn't worked the way I wanted to, but it's got nothing, like nothing has happened. And when I like brought it to other people to like, maybe I've asked the coach or maybe I've asked my VA or I've like gone to other people and been like, what am I doing wrong here? Like what has not worked? Nobody has ever been able to like point out in that situation what I did do wrong or what was missing, because like on the surface it should have worked. It works for other people. Why didn't it work for me? And so I just think it's important to have these conversations, because sometimes we actually can't identify what it was that didn't work for us and why that happened.
Yeah. And sometimes as well, like in those situations, when you already have done all that and you're like, why hasn't it worked? What's wrong with me? You can end up kind of spiraling a little bit and thinking, well, I must have done something wrong. I must be the problem. I must be the thing that's wrong. When in actual fact, that's not the case. It's just whatever that person was teaching or whatever that person's blueprint is didn't work for you. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're at fault, but it can be very frustrating, especially when you don't then get the support or get the feedback of actually this is where you went wrong. It can be really difficult to kind of move on from that, can't it?
I remember a while back I was in a launch program. So it was like a program where they support you throughout a launch of a product, and I watched every training, implemented right away, and I actually did 3 launches using that model. I got 2 sales from the first one and 0 sales from the following 2 launches. And I went to the Facebook group and I was like, can you just like give me some feedback here, because I feel like I'm doing all of this and it's not landing. And the coach responded to me, and I remember distinctly, she said, you're sabotaging yourself, full stop. That was the entire conversation. There was no follow-up like of how or like what she'd seen or like something she could reflect back. So obviously that sent me into a massive spiral of like, oh my God, like how am I sabotaging myself? And I, at this point, believe that it's because she didn't know what to say to me. Like she didn't know what was wrong. She didn't know how to fix things for me. She didn't know how to help me tweak the system to make it work for me. And I learned a very important lesson in that moment, because I think we all are taught that we need to have signature systems and we need to have processes for doing things, and that's what we teach to our clients. And while yes, that is a great starting point, we are all so unique. We all have different businesses. We all have different goals. We all have different audiences. We all have different styles. We have different personalities. We have different values. And all of these things sort of scramble together to mean that we need something different. And so, yes, in my programs, I might initially teach a model, a system for doing things. But if any of my clients are ever like I just can't get this bit to work, or oh, I'm not sure how to make this fit in my business, I will jump on a call with them in a second. I don't care if it is like a year-long high-ticket mastermind or a course that was like £97. I don't care. I will either jump on a call or get on a voice note and like go back and forth with them to help them figure out how to fit the model to their business, not the other way around. Because how arrogant are we if we're thinking that people have to mold their entire business around some like 6-figure system that we came up with in a coffee shop? I mean, please.
So true. But that's the kind of support that we need to be giving our clients. That's the kind of spaces that we need to be creating for people as coaches. We need to say to people like, if you are struggling, it is okay for you to come to us and say what you are telling me isn't working. And then we can brainstorm, we can try different things, we can tweak different things. Because as you say, we are all so unique, even down to like we have different, like the way that our energy works, we have different, what's the word, like human designs, like we have different neuro things. I don't know what the correct word is, but that's the kind of environment that we should be creating for people in order to get them the best results. And that's also what then helps people stay with us and trust us and believe in us, and in the same breath believe in themselves, because they don't end up walking away from something that we've done with them going, oh well, it's me, it's my fault, I just didn't do it right.
I think it's just unfortunate that way of doing business does not mesh with this obsessive quest for scalability that has taken so much of the internet by storm.
I know, I feel like it's been a real theme the past few years, isn't it? But hopefully there'll be, I don't know, maybe
like who's going to be the person to tell them that if people aren't getting the results, then it's actually not scalable?
Yeah. Absolutely. There was something else that I wanted to say on that matter, and I can't remember what it is. I feel like there's so many things that are like coming up. I'm just like, I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about this as well. Let me just have a little look at my questions. I think this one's going to feed in nicely based on what we were saying. So we've just been obviously discussing all this information that we're bombarded with, all these courses, all these people that are kind of teaching the same things that have worked with them. When we are bombarded with all this same stuff and the same people are saying the same stuff online, and because they're the people that have got the teams who mean they're visible every single day, we obviously see their content a lot more. How can we unlearn what we're being taught, and how can we kind of walk away from their advice when we see them as being successful? It's very hard to see someone that's being successful, see all the testimonials that are being shared, and then go, okay, but actually I want to walk away from that because that's not who I am. It's how can I explain it properly? Like when you're being shown this vision and all these people have done well from it, it's our nature to think, well, I must be able to do well from it as well. But how can we kind of walk away from that, and how can we unlearn it and not fall into that trap of being so like stuck on those success stories?
So my first piece of advice would be to go wild with the unfollow button, or the mute button if you don't want to unfollow people completely. Just temporarily, like, clear your feeds of all of those messages, because if you are being so bombarded with ideas and therefore feelings, because when we react to those ideas, we then have all of these messy feelings going on, you can't think for yourself. That you can't formulate thoughts for yourself when you are too busy having an emotional reaction to something that somebody else has said. So just silence those voices for now. That's the first step. And then the second step is do something to create space mentally. And that means stop working, like stop trying to figure out the secret, stop trying to come up with the perfect idea. Just give yourself a chunk of time away from that. It could be as small as an afternoon, it could be as big as a week, 3 weeks, a month, 6 months, whatever. Take a chunk of time to do something that is completely removed from your working environment. So it might be going for a nice WALK somewhere. I can't say that word when we have 3 dogs in the room.
I do the same.
It might be like planting something in your garden. It might be reading a book. It might be doing a puzzle. It might be like starting an art project. It could be anything, but something that is not related to your business. Just allow yourself to get away from that space and do something that forces you to be present, that forces you to maybe use your hands or engage with your body. And I found that when I do something like that, it immediately sort of grounds me. It helps me come back to myself. And that sort of, in turn, reminds me that I'm safe, that I'm stable, I'm steady, I have these foundations, I'm not wobbly. And you feel very wobbly when you're always having these questions and doubts sparked by other people's content. So that's the first thing, sort of just interrupt that pattern of consuming everything. And what I've had to do in the past is actually sort of put a bit of a, let's say, a wall down and stop taking things in. So I stopped listening to podcasts. I stopped reading like business and personal development books for a while. I stopped consuming all of that stuff and focus on a process of creation instead. And so every single morning, you already know I do my morning pages, but after doing that, I would ask myself, like, what do I need to say today? And then I would just let myself write. I would set a timer for like 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on what I had going on that day. And I would just free write. And sometimes that piece of content in my journal became an amazing post. Sometimes it became the topic of a live stream or even of a whole course. Sometimes it was just for me. And it was like, what do I need to say today? And I would just answer that question. So without looking at social media, without consuming anything that was created by somebody else, I would just like take it back to basics and try and reclaim confidence in my own voice and my own thoughts. And then practice like that can be very much supported by any kind of energetic tool that allows you to let go of things. So anything like EFT, breath work, Reiki, anything that sort of gives you an energetic flush out is really, really helpful when you're sort of stuck in those spirals. So that's where I would recommend getting started. Obviously, like I've given you a few ideas there, but hopefully there's something that works for everybody.
Yeah, I love those. I love those. And that whole idea of saying to yourself, like, what do I need to say today? Like, that's such a simple but powerful question. And you've reminded me, like, I used to do that myself and have obviously forgotten about the fact that I used to do that for myself until you just said it. I used to sit with my journal and quite often I'd be like, okay, what do I want to say today? And then at the same time as well, I'd also say to myself, like, what do I need today? And like would ask myself, like, what do I need, before I would see all the things online telling me that I need to be doing this and I need to be doing that and I should be over here and I should be there and all that stuff. And coming back to yourself and choosing yourself before you choose anyone else, before you choose to absorb information from anyone else, is so powerful. And it's something we all do. It's not going to cost us anything. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. You don't need any special tools to do it. Like, it's available to all of us. I think that's really, really useful advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and then like kind of connected there is, then I would start doing what you do for other people for yourself. So it doesn't really matter if you have like a product-based business or a service-based business, if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're, I don't know, a yoga instructor, whatever it is that you do, make it a priority to do that thing for yourself, to go through your own process. So if you had a client or customer come to you, what would you do for them? What would you give them? Give that to yourself. Because what that does is, number one, it reinforces that you know your shit, that you know what you're doing, that what you do has an impact. Number two, it has that impact on you. So it will, like, no matter what industry you work in, it will make an improvement for you. And when we improve one area of our lives, it always has a ripple effect on everything else, always. So even if you're not working directly on sort of your pain point, the thing that you think is your big issue, you can improve it by prioritizing something else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then you kind of become an embodiment of your work, and that's going to attract more people to you because you're embodying everything that you're teaching.
Absolutely. And I honestly, like, fairly regularly will go through my own courses, and I create so much stuff that honestly, like, I forget about a lot of the things that I've talked about in earlier, like, workshops that I've run or programs that I put together. And so periodically going back and working through those, number one, it like sort of, it boosts my ego, it makes me feel like really good and really smart. And number two, it gives me ideas of what I can talk about. And number three, it actually has that impact on me. So it works. I have proof that it works because it works for me. And when you have that proof, you can talk about what you do with so much more confidence, because if not, there's like this underlying message of this could work. Like, this could work in theory. Like, it looks nice. I put a lot of thought and time into it, and it could work for you. But when you've done it, and you've done it recently, and you've done it more than one time, then you can talk about it with so much more certainty and so much more conviction. And that can be felt. People can feel if you are like, if you would like die on the hill of this product, or if you would be like, yeah, it's just like one of these cool things that I've done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've discussed a lot, and you're obviously very passionate about helping people run their business in their own way based on your own experience. You've got your podcast, Your Biz Your Rules, and I know that you're also running a new series, or will be running a new series, about redefining your rules in business. What are the 3 biggest rules you think need breaking the most in the online world?
Ooh.
Love to put people on the spot.
3 big, well, the challenge is not coming up with 3 things, it's coming up with only 3 things. So the rules that really need breaking in the online world. So I would say one of the biggies for me is, how do I want to phrase this? Hang on, please hold the line. I feel like we see a lot of focusing on the metrics and focusing on the outcomes in business. And that can mean like money, it can mean follower count, it can mean all kinds of different things for different people. And largely those things are outside of our control. Those are things that are sort of, yeah, we can influence them, but ultimately they're based on a decision that somebody else makes. And so I think switching your attention from those things to the things that you can control in your business is a really empowering move to make. And something that I really encourage people to do is get in touch with their values, like their true values, not the values that they think make them sound like a good person, but the things that truly matter to them. And that might be money, that might be fame, like there's nothing wrong with that, but really tap into what those things are and actively make sure that they are woven into every part of your business, whether that is your offers, whether that is your marketing and your messaging, whether that is the like operational systems that you use behind the scenes, whether that is how you communicate with people. It doesn't matter. Any facet of your business, make sure that each of your values is visible there. Don't just be that person who tells everyone your values by writing a social media post about them. Live them, breathe them, infuse them into everything. So that's one rule.
I love that. Next one.
The next one is it's kind of like twofold, this one. So it's more about working practices. So anything that says you have to work for this amount of hours, or that even like the opposite, like that. So if you like, don't work for too many hours, don't work for too few hours, don't have too many breaks, don't have too few breaks. Like there are so many rules about what we should be doing in terms of the structure of our days. And really, like, we are not in business for ourselves so that we can live by somebody else's timetable. We're just not. Nobody on this planet thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run my own business so somebody else can tell me what hours to work. Like, nobody says that. Nobody thinks that. Nobody wants that. So pay attention to your own patterns, your own energy, your own preferences, your own lifestyle, and allow yourself to craft something that works for you. And that might mean that you do work 9 to 5 because, you know, that just works better with your family life, because it means that you can, you know, have a good solid amount of time working while the kids are at school or whatever. That might really, really work for you. You might be somebody who just does not do mornings. Like, you cannot have a coherent thought before 11 a.m. If that's the case, go with that. And if you're somebody who's like, after 2 p.m, like, I am done, like there was nothing of value coming out of my body after 2 p.m, then pay attention to that as well. And if you know that you work really well, if you can stay focused in 4-hour chunks, do that. If you notice that anything like beyond 25 minutes is too much, make that how you structure your day. Really pay attention to what works for your brain and what works for your body. Ignore what anybody else has to say about productivity and all of that stuff, because while it's fun and it's interesting and we can immerse ourselves in that and tell us that it's really benefiting our businesses, actually the most important thing is that it works for you and your life and how you want to be living it.
That's so true. And this is something that I consistently have to come back to, because I feel like I can live like that for a while. Like, I fluctuate. Like, there are times where I'll have a couple of weeks where between like 9 p.m. and midnight, I am just on fire. Like, they are my best hours. I love working that time. Can't do anything during the day. Don't like to get out of bed till like 10, 11. And then there are other times where I will get up in the morning and I'll just wake up and I'll have everything done by 12, and I'll hit 12 o'clock and be like, do you know what? I just don't want to work anymore. And that works for me. But then I go back to the like, oh, but I really need to be doing this, or I've only worked 3 hours today, despite the fact that I've got like a week's worth of work done in 3 hours. I'm like, oh no, like, but I've only done 3 hours. Like, let me make myself do something else. And I constantly have this like battle in my head, because I still live at home at the moment. I'm like, if I've not been working while mum's out at work, like, she's going to think this or she's going to think that. And I'm like, this is not the reason I started my own business. Like, I did this to work on my own, work on my own terms. And some days that means working for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. Some days it means working a 10-hour day, because I'm so engrossed in everything that I'm doing. I'm enjoying it. And some days that just means working for like an hour, which was yesterday.
And I think that's an important thing to note here. Just because you decide something works at some point doesn't mean that has to be the thing that works forever, because we are like cyclical creatures. Like, women especially, like, we have our like menstrual cycle that does impact our energy. So there will be some times of the month where you're like, oh my god, I can conquer the world, like, don't get in my way because I will run you over kind of energy. And other times where you're like, literally the most I can do today is like wash my face. Like, don't expect me to put a bar on. That's not happening. I will do the bare minimum. And that's natural. That's a natural way of being. And then you also notice that different seasons of the year you will feel different. So maybe in the winter you feel extra creative, or maybe in the winter you feel the opposite. Maybe you feel like you just want to switch off in the winter. Maybe in the summer, that's when you feel most motivated to like be visible and put yourself out there. Or maybe in the summer, you just want to switch the off button and chill. So paying attention to how your body and your brain react to not just like your own cycles, but the cycles of the year can also help give you some insight there.
Yeah, that's so true. It's something that I'm always like trying to be more conscious of as well, and keep reminding myself of that. I know that summertime, I'm like, I don't want to do any work. I just want to sit around. And I feel like my cycle's a bit backwards, because as soon as I get my period, I get the most creative and I have the most energy. And I feel like everyone else is like, no, don't do anything, don't go out, just hibernate, like cancel everything in your diary. And I'm like, well, I don't want to go outside, but actually I'm really productive in like the time that I've got my period, which is mad.
But then that is a prime example of something that works for the people doesn't work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And then my third rule is no decision is a forever decision.
Yes. Oh my God, I love this one so much. Yeah.
Because I just think like you can't be so precious about every choice you make in your business. You can't put all of your eggs in a single basket, because you'll be devastated if it doesn't pan out the way you want it to be to go. And sometimes we have these amazing ideas that we think, oh my God, this is the thing. And we get really excited and we get really enthusiastic and we put all of this time and energy into it. And then when we start doing it, we're like, not sure I like this, mate. Not so fun. And then there's that voice in our head of like, oh, but you've put all of this effort in. You've told everyone about it now. Like, oh, like you can't go back on your word. You can't not follow through with this. Yes, you absolutely can. Even a tattoo can be removed. No decision in your business has to last a lifetime.
And I think a lot of the reasons that we think it does is that ego saying, but what is everyone else going to think of you? Like, you're flaky, you're not consistent, you change your mind all the time. These are all the thoughts that I have. I change my mind constantly, and I've done the whole thing where I've created the program, I've launched it. Halfway through the launch, I'm like, it doesn't feel good, I'm going to change it. And even like the stuff that I talk about in my business, I've pivoted so many times, but it is always that battle of, do I follow what feels good to me, or do I listen to my ego and just stick with it? Because otherwise people are going to think that, I don't know, I'm flaky, not consistent, like they're going to judge me, kind of thing.
Well, and I think this is where having some kind of practice that really helps you be very self-aware is helpful. So for me, that's morning pages, because I have written at least 3 pages in my journal every day for years, like no exaggeration, for years. I know myself really well, which means I find it very easy to identify my own patterns and catch myself in the moment. So if I'm ever experiencing that kind of thing where it's mid-launch and I'm like, I don't like this anymore, it doesn't take a lot for me to ask myself, like, is this because I've changed my mind about the offer? Is this because it doesn't feel good to provide this thing anymore, to spend my time on this thing? Or is it because this launch isn't going the way I wanted it to go? Is it because I'm not making the sales? Is it because I'm doubting that I can make the sales? Is it that I'm like scared that the people I'm currently talking to about it are going to be really high maintenance? And like really unraveling that and figuring out why it is you want to change your mind. And if you do that every time you have that urge, you find yourself feeling much more empowered and discerning in the decisions you make. So you'll feel a lot more confident letting something go, because it's not just you being flaky, it's not you being afraid, because you've already asked yourself those questions. You've already really figured that out and come to a solid conclusion about your next step, whether that is to do the thing or not to do the thing.
Yeah. And I
Big
think
journaling fan over here.
I think sometimes it is that fear as well, isn't it? Like, especially if you're going through a launch, you're putting yourself out there so much more. And it's almost that like, I'm being super visible. It's really uncomfortable. I feel really scared. Maybe I'll change it because I feel scared. And then, as you say, when you have that self-awareness, you can kind of catch those patterns and be like, oh, I know that this is, I don't know, maybe a bit of self-sabotage. And I think that reminded me of the other thing that I was going to say a while ago about this whole idea of self-sabotage and how it very much is a real thing, but also I think sometimes it can be a way to almost plaster over what the actual problem is. It can almost be a way to like place blame on someone, like, oh, you're self-sabotaging, you're the problem, you're doing the thing that's not getting you the results you want, rather than you're doing all the right things, it's not self-sabotage, and rather than the other person that's maybe facilitating what you're doing, rather than them taking responsibility and having those moments like we spoke about, like you will jump on a call with a client and say, okay, let's work through this together, rather than someone doing that, they just place the whole self-sabotage label on it.
Yeah, and I think I've experienced it in both forms. Like I can 100% recognize that sometimes I sabotage myself, and because I'm so self-aware, I know exactly how I do that. Like for me, it's if I start staying up really late just binge watching box sets, it's like that's sort of the first domino getting knocked over, because then when I'm tired I like act very differently to when I'm fully rested. And so when I've had a couple of nights of just like binge watching the same thing that I've watched 50 times before, and then having to get up early for the dogs, I know that I'm starting that cycle, so I can catch myself and pull myself back. Like that's why doing a lot of mindset work and inner work is really beneficial, because you do get to know yourself really well, and you can recognize for yourself what you're doing that maybe is a little bit toxic or is, you know, sabotaging yourself in a variety of ways. But for somebody who doesn't really know you, who doesn't work closely with you, who doesn't spend a lot of time with you, to just sort of toss out a comment about you sabotaging yourself, don't listen to that shit. Do not listen, because they don't know. Now, it's very, very different if you are, you know, talking to like a friend, a biz bestie who you talk to regularly, and they can see this cycle that you go on. They can see like the kind of things that you say to them before a certain thing happens. They can pull you up on that kind of thing. Or if you're working with a coach who, you know, is very, very present with you and pays a lot of attention, again, to your patterns, to your habits, to the language that you use, they can say, look at this, what's happening right here. And I encourage you to really go deeper and figure out what's going on. Because like you said, self-sabotage is absolutely a thing. But for people to just use it as an offhand excuse for why their six-figure system isn't working for you is an insult.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I completely agree. Like when it's somebody that you know and you've worked closely with, and they can say it to you, or even if they just suggest it, and they, like I'm working with Marie at the moment, and she, like if she was to say to me, do you think this is self-sabotage, I'd be able to sit there and go, is it not, because I have the self-awareness about myself, so I would be able to answer that question for myself. But for somebody that doesn't know you in that respect and doesn't know your patterns, doesn't know you well, to just go, it's self-sabotage, not even do you think this might be self-sabotage, is very insulting.
And it kind of creates that dynamic of like the guru and the acolyte, which we see a lot of in the coaching world, of, you know, like my declarations are accurate and channeled from source, therefore I will hear no arguments. Like that's very much the vibe. And we all know that's a load of bullshit, really. If we step back and think about it, we all know that that is absolute twaddle.
I really struggle because I had this conversation with Marie actually the other day. I can always see the really big picture, like the bird's eye view picture. So somebody could come to me with the two different arguments, or two people could come to me with the two different arguments, and I would be able to understand both of the arguments, even if they were the complete opposite. So when somebody is so solid in what they're talking about, I find it like an effort to have that kind of stepped back view and go, okay, this is very much what they believe, but this isn't gospel. Like, I can get really attracted into it because of the way that they speak or because of how kind of confident they are in what they're saying. But I have to remind myself, like, that's not the case. Like, just because they're spouting all this, just because they've got all these followers, just because they've made X amount of money, does not mean that what they are saying is true for me. And I think that's what we all have to do, like, to come back to that and say, yes, they're successful. Yes, they're achieving that. Yes, they're really good at what they do for some people, but it's not true for me. So I'm going to leave it.
I think something that I have always had in the back of my mind is the film Catch Me If You Can.
Oh my God, yes.
Because I remember how old would I have been when I first saw that? It must have been like 10 or 11, something like that. And I remember thinking at the time of watching it, because it's based on a true story, I was like, if you say anything with enough confidence, you can have people believing you.
Yeah, absolutely. You've just got to say it in the right way and with the confidence.
Or you can like walk in with the right hat and have people handing you the keys to a plane like that. And that's always been in the back of my mind. So when people do come with that sort of conviction and that certainty, I remember that.
Yeah. So true. So true. I actually use that, the whole confidence thing. Like, I have to go to the toilet I get like anxiety bladder. I mean, I don't know whether that's the right phrase, but I have to go to the toilet a lot whenever I'm out anywhere. And I always, wherever I am, I'll find a pub and I will just walk in like I know exactly where I'm going. Like, I'm like supposed to be there, like I've been there before, and I just march my way through and find the toilet with so much confidence that no one will ever stop me and be like, oh, excuse me, where are you going? Whereas and I know this is completely different to what we were talking about, but I feel like it's that kind of same premise. Like, if you walk in somewhere with enough confidence, if you say things with enough confidence, people are going to believe you. But that's where we have the responsibility of having our own self-awareness, trusting ourselves, and having that self-connection so that we can decide whether that thing is right or is not right for us.
Oh, actually, you just reminded me of something. If I can have a fourth rule to break.
Yes, go for it. I'll let you have a fourth one.
It's that you don't have to make decisions on somebody else's timeline. And I think that can be something that we really struggle with when somebody has like such charisma and such power and such certainty when they're saying something. Like, we've all, been on sales calls, attended webinars, taken part in challenges where people have been pitching their offers to us. We've all been there. And sometimes you really do believe that ticking clock. And you feel like you need to act immediately. But when that happens, you're not acting from this like grounded, certain place of this is the right choice for me. You are acting from that place of like, oh my God, I am going to run out of time. I am going to miss out on this. I am like, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to get that. And there are all of these like messy thoughts scrambling around our brains. And that's why I've made it a policy in my business. Like, I do not accept payments while I'm on a call. So if I'm on a call with somebody, they are not allowed to purchase something until the call is over.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're advised to do is like take credit card details on the phone, which is gross. But because of that, it's one of the policies that I've made in my business, because I know that I very easily get people excited. It's a gift that I've always had. Like, when I'm talking one-on-one with someone, they feel unstoppable. They feel like they're just ready to go, full of ideas, like really, really excited. And with that gift comes great responsibility. I don't want somebody to then, invest in a product, invest in a service and have regrets. I want people to go away, to look at their finances, to think about what they really want, to, discuss it with their husband if they share finances, because that's not a disempowering move. That's just, considerate.
Yep.
And then come back to me when they've had a chance to really think for themselves and tell me if it's a yes or if it's a no.
Yeah, I really like that. And then you're fully empowering them to make the decision based on them, rather than saying, you need me, like you need to be working with me to be able to get X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, if you would like my help, then I'm here. If you don't, then that's not the end of the world. Like, that's absolutely fine, because you're still going to achieve what you want to achieve. Like, yeah, I can support you with it, but I'm not the reason that you're going to be successful. You're the reason that you're going to be successful. And I think as well, on that same note, oh my God, my brain is just not with me today. What was I going to say then? I was going to say that I've been on those sales calls, like the first one-to-one coach I ever worked with. She was like, she did the whole sales call and was like, can you pay now? And I was like, oh no, I've not got my card handy. And then I got off the call and I had that, like, that feeling in my stomach of like, I don't think this is right. But I felt like I couldn't turn around and go, do you know what? I've changed my mind, because I'd already said yes on the call. And it ended up not being a very good experience at all, because it was just not right for me. And why can't I think of the thing that I was going to say? Oh, yeah, that's it. One of the phrases that I've kind of realized is very damaging quite recently is the "if you're serious about" thing that people will like put on the sales pages, that people will say. I've said it before in my business previously when I'm like marketing something. I'm like, if you're serious about making more money or getting more clients, or you'll invest in this product, or like sign up for this product now. And it's like, this is something that I've realized very recently, like it's quite a damaging phrase, because it implies that if people don't buy what you're selling, they're not serious, and that can make people feel bad about themselves. And of course they're serious about their goals, of course they're serious about their dreams and what they want to achieve, but them not investing in your thing doesn't mean that they don't care about what they're doing. So I think as well, language is really important in the way that we speak to ourselves, obviously, but the way that we speak in our marketing, in our social media posts, in the conversations we have with people. And we're careful not to use language that can be alienating or can be really disempowering.
Yeah, I think that going through like trauma training and becoming trauma informed can really have a massive impact on the way that you communicate these things, because you often think it's really only going to impact the service that you provide, but actually the way that you market things and the way you talk about things also changes. And I think you're right. I think that phrases like that can be really damaging. And, you know, people just need to have a bit more empathy at the end of the day when they are marketing, because it's still very, like, a lot of the trends are very rooted in that old paradigm patriarchal thinking. And we know that there are other ways to do it. We know there are. And so, yeah, I think empathy is important.
Yeah.
Being willing to do things differently is important. I've seen a lot of, and this goes back to my days of working behind the scenes in other people's businesses. I tended to have very long-term clients, so I would work with the same people for a number of years, and therefore I could see their evolution. So I could see how they changed as people as time went on. And I know there were people who maybe started out being really like thoughtful and really considerate and really leading with their heart, moving into this state of really lacking empathy, and they stopped being able to relate to people who maybe had very real life struggles to contend with, as well as building a business. Because when you are genuinely struggling to figure out how to feed your children or how to feed yourself, you can't invest in that like 5-figure launch program, no matter how serious you are about meeting your goals. You just can't, because your number one priority has to be keeping the lights on, making sure everyone gets 3 meals a day.
Yeah. And then it can make people feel really shameful when people aren't empathetic towards their situation. It's not a nice space to be.
And I think it's not about, giving people things for free so that they can do it no matter their circumstances. It's not that I'm saying. No. What I'm saying is that if somebody's saying, as much as I would love to do this, I can't because XYZ, it's respecting that and respecting them enough to trust their word, instead of being like, but if you really wanted this, you could make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the way that you kind of handle that conversation afterwards, I think, because I've had conversations with people where I've seen their program, or I've attended like a live challenge, for example, and I've like gained so much over those 4 or 5 days, and then it's come to like the program and the investment and stuff, and it's just not been feasible for me. It's just not been possible. And I've had the person message and just be like, are you going to join? And I'm like, no, it's just not possible for me right now. Well, yeah, but you can make your money back in a month. Like, you can join now and then you'll have made it back. And I'm just like, no, it's not possible. And then just like nothing, like never speak to me again. And I just think rather than like a little message at the end to just say, okay, I completely respect that. Like, maybe here's another resource, or here's this lower cost product that can help you in the meantime, or let's stay in touch or something, would be a much nicer way to handle things, so that it doesn't leave people feeling ashamed, or like I just then was just like, okay, well, you clearly didn't give a shit about me. All you wanted was my money.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It makes people feel like the only worth that they have is what they're giving you.
Yeah.
And that should never be the dynamic if you're going to work with somebody. You should feel like that energetic exchange is fair. And I personally like to think that people feel that sort of love and attention from me, whether they are attending a free thing or investing in something that is more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what our hopes always are, isn't it? Or like ours. I mean, obviously not everyone's. But yeah. Okay. So are there any new rules that you've created for yourself since deciding to unlearn and unfollow all this popular advice that we repeatedly see?
Well, so I think we've touched on a few of these already. So one of them is never accepting payments on a call.
Yes, I think that's such a great one.
Yeah. One of them is always surprising people. So no matter what somebody signs up for when they work with me, they're going to get a surprise. There is going to be something that I did not mention on the sales page. Like, it's not a fast action bonus. It's nothing like that. They always just get an added extra.
Oh, I love that. That's so exciting.
Yeah. So for example, when I last launched Unshakable Business Academy, which is a program that I ran for a couple of years. I'm taking a little break from it now, but I absolutely love it, and something that I surprised everyone with after they'd, like signed up, were on board, all that stuff. I was like, by the way, everyone gets like unlimited one-on-one box of support.
Oh, that's so nice.
And they did, like, that wasn't something that I used to, to sell it, to market it.
Yeah.
It was just this additional extra that helped people feel so much more supported, like they were seen in the group, because group experiences can be amazing and they can be powerful. But if you're the kind of person like I am, who withdraws when things get tough, or when they like have to face a difficult thing in their lives, having somebody actually reach out to you and be like, let's talk, makes a huge difference. It really helps you feel seen and helps you feel supported.
Yeah, so much so. That little bit of personalization. And I'm the same, like when I'm struggling, depending on the group environment, sometimes I can go into the group and be like, blah, 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 this is what's going on, I'm really struggling. But other times I do really withdraw, especially when I see everyone else is appearing to be doing really well. It makes me kind of go back a bit. So I think that's such a lovely thing that you do. And I'm very excited for the surprises that we're going to give people when we do our retreat.
I know.
Brainstorm loads.
Well, and on that note,
surprising.
on that note, one of my other rules is self first.
Yes.
Because in the past, it was business first, self gets whatever scraps are left over. But now I really try to, no matter when my workday is going to be, I try and always have a chunk of time just for me before I start work. And sometimes that will be 10, 20 minutes. Sometimes it'll be like 6 hours. It doesn't, there's no real rhyme or reason. It's really about asking myself what it is that I need. Like, what do I need today?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And as again, like I think so many of us, and I've done it countless times where my business has come first and I've been last, and it's not sustainable to run a business that way, because the better you feel about yourself, the more confident you feel, the healthier you feel, the more sleep you're getting, the more you're caring for yourself, the better you can show up in your business. The more ideas you get, the more creativity you have, the more confidence you have to put yourself out there, the better the conversations you have with people are going to be. So it's so important to put yourself first, as you say, and that's going to be the premise of our retreat, really, isn't it?
It is. And I get that it's so counterintuitive because, especially, you know, if you've got a very real need to make money, like that's a prime example, then you think that you need to be giving your all to your business. You need to be putting in longer hours. You need to be working harder. You need to be trying more. You need to be really, really in your business. But actually, when you're in that frame of mind, when you're in that like panicked, desperate mode of being, are you going to be having your best ideas? Are you going to be having like supportive, empowering conversations? Are you going to be doing like really memorable marketing? Like, probably not. Probably not.
And not only that, then if you're doing all that and you're exhausting yourself, marketing yourself, when you do get clients, you're not going to be able to serve them at the best because you're going to be so worn out from pushing yourself so hard. It's much better to keep like a consistent, steady, keep on a like consistent, steady, even keel where you're consistently looking after yourself, you're putting yourself first, you're showing up for your business. And then when it comes to serving your clients, you're going to be able to serve them at the best you possibly can.
Exactly. And I mean, I know for me, when I feel well rested, when I feel emotionally stable, when I'm having fun, that is when I am absolutely unstoppable in my business. That is when I have the best ideas. That is when I end up collaborating with amazing people. That is when good things start happening.
Yeah, that's so
And
true.
that's the order you need to do it: self first and then business.
Yeah. And you can even like come to your business with so much more clarity as well when you've given yourself like space and time and like, yeah, just space to kind of be. You have that, you give yourself space for the clarity to come in. There's nothing worse than when you're feeling frustrated or stuck or overwhelmed than sitting there and trying to like force yourself to come up with a solution. And I do, like, this is a pattern that I fall into all the time, where I will be having those moments where I'm like just stuck in a funk and I'm like, I can't work out what the solution should be. I don't know what I'm doing. Everything feels like a lot. And I'll sit there and I'll try and make myself come up with the answer. And then I'll remind myself that actually, if I was to just take like the day off, the answer would come. And it happens every single time. And I am getting better with it, but it's still a practice, and it still comes from having that self-awareness and learning those patterns about yourself and what kind of works and what doesn't.
Yeah, one of my old patterns was whenever I'd like really feel the pinch in terms of money, like whenever I was struggling to make money, I would just like, I'd create all these reactive products. Like from this like place of like, I just need to make some money now. I'd be like, bam, what can I create and sell? And that's not to say they were inherently bad things, but there were never things that I'd put the same amount of like time and heart into as I normally would. There were things that I was putting out there purely because I was like, I need to make some money now.
Yeah, I've done that.
And when you do that, it's like I said, it's not that they're necessarily bad things, but the same level of passion isn't there. And when you don't have the passion for the product, you don't have that same like magnetism and charisma when you're talking about it. And if you don't have the magnetism or the charisma, then you don't make the sales. And it's like this vicious circle that just keeps on going.
Yeah. And then it's exhausting. Then you feel like you're the problem and there's something wrong with you. And then you're even more just to be like, oh, I'm just gonna not put myself first because I don't deserve to look after myself. It's just, yeah, becomes.
And you'll notice yourself saying things like, nothing I ever do works. Like I've done
Yeah.
all of these things and none of it's worked. And actually you've only done like one thing just 20 times.
Oh my God, it's so true. And it's so funny how we all have like similar patterns. Like we all fall into the same kind of traps, but it is like recognizing what they are and then choosing to unlearn them. So on that note, is there anything else you think we should cover, or anything else that you wanted to mention in terms of like the confidence to unfollow advice, or are we all good?
I honestly think that there is so much that you can dive into on this topic. There really is, because there's so much advice to unfollow. But I think it really begins and ends with just being mindful of what you're consuming. And we talked a lot about unfollowing and muting voices and like trying and testing and being okay with releasing things. But I want to talk about how to sort of fuel your mind with more of what you do want, because not all advice is bad. Not all creators are out to get you. Like, some people are the right fit for a while, and then you go in different directions and you need something else, or maybe you reach a different level or you want to focus on a different area and you need a different kind of support. And so what I'd love to do is, again, sit with my journal, because big journaler, and I journal about what I want to see in my feeds, the kind of people I want to be surrounded by. So maybe it's somebody who is a specialist in that thing, or somebody who talks about that, or somebody who loves Britney Spears, like whatever it is, like all of these different qualities that I want to welcome into my sphere. And then I just start paying attention to where these people show up. So maybe it's that I'm Facebook friends with someone who ticks those boxes, but I never thought to follow them on Instagram. Maybe it's that I have been following someone on Instagram and like occasionally seeing their stories, but I haven't been listening to their podcast, even though they're talking about exactly the thing that I said I want more of. So yes, like letting go of the things that just don't vibe with you anymore, but welcome in what you do want, and really think about what that is, being mindful about what you're asking for.
Yeah, I love that. And then
so if you hear my dog drinking water in the background, she's like laughing really loudly.
I sent Jasper to Nanny and Granddad's today, so I haven't got him here, but he normally makes a noise, so that's fine. We like dogs here. But no, I think I really like that, and kind of making that conscious decision to say, okay, this is what I want to see. Like, it's very easy to get to that point where we say, do you know what, I don't want to see this anymore, or this is exhausting me. But then having that conscious choice of, I want this. And I feel like I've done a little bit of this recently. There's a few accounts that I've started following on Instagram who's like podcasts I listen to, nothing related to business, nothing to do with mindset. They're just bloody hilarious. And when I go on their feed, or like when they show up in my feed, they just make me laugh. And it's just that kind of like break from having to consciously think about implementing a new tool or trying out a new strategy, or I don't know, learning something else. It's just nice.
And like, this works for whatever platform you like to consume things on. So if you listen to podcasts, if you love Instagram, if you love TikTok, if you love YouTube, you can just Google YouTube channels about X, or Instagram account about Y, and I actually look for the topics that you like, and then just like click through to some of those, maybe watch a couple of stories and just see if you like them as people. And like, when you do that, when you're intentional about refueling your feeds, it's like something new is unlocked. Like, you just feel that spark again. You feel this sort of possibility, and like this concept of new opportunities and new relationships and new ideas, and you step out of that echo chamber. So especially, like you said at the beginning, if you've been feeling like you just see the same people saying the same things all the time and it's becoming really tiresome for you, actively shift that. You're not at the mercy of your social media feeds. You actually get to decide what's in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much power in making those decisions as well. Like, I've recently done this where I've had a mass unfollowing, mass unsubscribing from people that did serve me for a while, but are just no longer aligned with me and what I want to do. And I don't see their posts and feel inspired or empowered. I see their posts and feel drained or exhausted or bad about myself, and I don't want to create that environment for myself. I want an environment where I open up I mean, I don't really use social media at the moment because of those things, but I want an environment where I do open up my feeds and just see stuff that makes me feel good. So important. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that goodness. I'm sure people will have got so much from this. I hope you've all taken notes, and remember, as Daire said, start implementing on what you've heard.
Yeah, so everybody, action step, choose one thing that you've heard from this episode and do something with it, even if that is just like jumping into Instagram stories and sharing a tip that you've heard, tagging Rebecca and the confidence and
yeah, tag us all tag us all,
and we will come and leave you some love. But seriously, like, take one thing from this episode and just do something with it. Just one thing.
Absolutely. So where can everyone find you if they want to know more?
So I am on Instagram, where I regularly jump on my Instagram stories and ramble away about what's going on behind the scenes. I am also currently a big fan of sharing the incremental growth of my seeds, because I've been planting some seeds in my garden. So I'm just Daire Paddy over on Instagram. I also have a YouTube channel where I share like video copies of my podcast, but also weekly tapping scripts. So if you love using EFT to sort of shift any emotional funkage that you've got going on, and also to like manifest and to magnetize new things, then check out the channel. And of course the podcast Your Biz Your Rules, which is just available on, you know, all of the usual places, Spotify, iTunes, all the stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, and you're going to come back for another episode later on in the year where we're going to talk about the confidence to get witchy and weird. So we're going to be talking all spiritual things, energetic things, witchy stuff, and I'm very much looking forward to chatting to you about all those things as well.
It's exciting. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you in the next one.